Hey there, welcome to the DFS Build NBA edition. I'm Kevin Roberts, getting ready to go over the DraftKings main slate for Saturday, December 7th. The goal is obviously to help you win, point you to some good plays, look over at ownership and projections and matchups, all that fun stuff. If this helps you out in any way, please smash that like button. Also subscribe to the channel so you get alerted to videos just like this. We do NBA every weekday that we can, and when I'm able to, I do one for Saturday, just like I'm doing now. We also push them out for the NFL main slate and the primetime showdown slates when we are able. There is one up for the Week 14 main slate for NFL, so check that out too. But let's get into it. We have a pretty interesting slate, lots of injury news, so definitely keep an eye on that as we get closer to lock. 4 hours yet until that happens, so it's just nice to look at the slate and see how things shake out before the big news drops. And we got some big decisions to make. So let's go position by position, look over the top plays here. Obviously, Luka Doncic leads the way with the best projection among point guards with 54 fantasy points. He looks amazing against the Raptors. I liked him the other day when we talked about him and Jokic up top. I like the idea of pairing them. I really don't think that's a bad thing to do again, provided the value is there. And there's not really much reason so far to think that there won't be. We just need a few injuries to actually transpire here and guys to sit to open up the value that we want. But whether you like Luka or not, he looks great. Not really garnering that much ownership at 7%. But yeah, the matchup with Toronto is amazing. Nothing bad to say about him except for the price. But like I said, you probably should be able to pay up for a lot of good guys here. So that isn't a big deal. If you do want to save $1,000 and get somebody who's kind of the same, you could go with SGA. The matchup with the Pels is really good as well. So I have nothing bad to say there. He looks really good. Scotty Barnes at 9.5K. If you're going to pay for Luka, you can consider Scotty Barnes on the other side of that Mavs Raptors game. 9.5K, though, I think I'd probably just rather go up for SGA or Luka over Scotty, but as usual, Scotty is in play. Devin Booker at 9.4K is just okay. At Miami, that doesn't sound great, especially if Jimmy Butler is in. Obviously, no KD, so you can still bank on the usage for Devin Booker. But I think considering the price points, I would much rather play Bradley Beal between him and Devin. But Devin Booker remains in play at 9.4. Nothing wrong with him based off of his role and upside for sure. Cade Cunningham continues to crush. He has been a bit of a monster as expected. His price is 9.6K, which is about where it's been, but it's come down a little bit from 9.7 to 9.8. He had 61 fantasy points in his last game. He's had 50-plus fantasy points in, 6 of his last 7. He's just been an absolute machine. He takes on the Knicks, who give up a lot of production outside on the perimeter, and they also could be down some key players with Jalen Brunson and Cat, both questionable. That would naturally impact their overall defense. So Cade Cunningham, the price is up there. So if you want to just keep going and go get Luka or SGA, I don't have any problem with that, and that is exactly what I prefer. But Cade Cunningham, if he's not going to be owned, and right now that is exactly what it looks like, is an interesting tournament play for sure. Brunson would look pretty good at 8.5K. I liked him the other day, the last time we talked. I think it was, let's see, let me double check when he played last. The last slate we talked about, no, it was 2 days ago. I liked him. He only had 37 fantasy points, but he did have 24 real points. That was a blowout, back-to-back blowouts. Actually 3 straight blowouts that they've been involved in where they won. So he just couldn't get there because he wasn't seeing the fourth. But before those blowouts happened, he was putting up major points, 52-plus fantasy points in 3 of his previous games, or 3 straight games before that stretch of blowouts happened. So we know Brunson has a ceiling, and a date with the Pistons is not something to be scared of. So if he's in at 8.5K, I do like him. If you want to drop down and save money, that's a 2K to 3K savings from the top studs on the slate. I think his projection is a little bit light, maybe perhaps because those blowouts that have been happening recently are kind of getting baked into it. But if he's in 8.5K, that looks good. I'll just say right there, since we're talking about him, if he is out, Miles McBride looks like one of the best values of the slate. The projections are not really going to factor that in yet, just because Brunson has not been ruled out yet. But McBride already has a role anyways. He's going to play 20 to maybe even 30 minutes off the bench. And he's been doing pretty well in that role, 21-plus fantasy points in each of his last 4 games. So he looks good. He's a fine value regardless at 4K flat. But if Brunson is out, he's a core play for me. So just keep an eye on that. Can't really know until it happens. I'll actually just update injury news right now as I'm going. Yeah, there's no official word on it yet, and we're 4 hours out, so that's not that shocking. But moving right along, Kyrie Irving 8.5 is just okay. Ja Morant is fine, but at Boston, just not plays that I really feel like I'm being pulled toward. Jamal Murray at 7.8 is a little bit high, but the Wizards are a really good matchup, so I think he's a fine tournament play if he's in. The issue there is he is questionable. So if he is out, Russell Westbrook looks like an awesome play. He would be 5.7K, I believe. Yeah, 5.7K. We know he's smashed in that role before. You will have to keep an eye on whether or not he actually starts, because there was that issue a couple times where he was priced about 5 to 6K, projected really well, projected for big minutes. I think he still usually ended up getting there, but obviously, we experienced it yesterday with D'Lo not getting the start. We experienced it a couple days ago with the Spurs bigs not getting the start and Jeremy Sohan sliding in. If you like a guy and then all of a sudden he's not in the starting lineup, that's ominous. So you kind of have to turn away from that sometimes. In Russell Westbrook's case, though, I don't really care that much, just because Jamal Murray being out just kind of guarantees a solid floor of minutes for him. And he's a very good points per minute player, even though he's kind of technically washed at this stage of his career. So I really like him at 5.7. Jamal Murray just needs to be out. Moving down the list here. Nobody else projects super well. Like DeJounte Murray, not going to really do that. OKC has a pretty good defense up front, and his projection's not very good. I think Jordan Poole at 6.9K remains in play, mostly because of interest in Denver guys. If we're going to go pay up for Jokic, which I am very interested in doing so on this slate, then we have to at least consider the Washington guys on the opposite side. Jordan Poole's main issue is forever and always, blowout risk. Like if his team's going to lose by 30, he's probably not going to play the fourth, and he's not going to get a full complement of minutes. So the upside is just not going to be there, at least like from a safety perspective. Now, 3 games ago, though, he had 52 fantasy points. So if the Wizards can hang tight, and if these, Aaron Gordon also was downgraded to questionable. So if Denver's going to be shorthanded on the road, it's not crazy to think some Wizards get there. So I think Poole at 6.9K, especially since he's kind of floating under the radar a little bit. I think he's really interesting for tournaments. I'm probably going to gravitate more towards the, deeper, puntier value, like Carrington at 4.4K. He's projecting for 31 minutes, solid 25-point fantasy projection for that price. He seems kind of blowout proof here. So I think he's the better play, but Jordan Poole is still in play. And really just overall, I think Wizards values look interesting because they are very shorthanded. They're going to be without Kyle Kuzma, no Malcolm Brogdon. Corey Kispert is out. Keyshawn George is out. I think Alexander Sarr was a late addition with a back injury. He is questionable as well. So across the board, Wizards value, it feels kind of gross, but we'll talk about more of them. But namely right now, as far as point guard goes, we can look at, Poole and Carrington and feel reasonably good about that. But yeah, let's check out who else we have here. Drew Holiday at 5K flat against the Grizzlies. Not the greatest matchup, but he remains really cheap, so I don't mind him. I just think for the most part at point guard, I'll even mention Jerry Butler at 3.6K, projected for 20 minutes. Another Wizards punt. I mean, I don't feel nearly as good about him as I do Carrington. It's just, that's a price play. But I think for the most part, it's going to be Luka and SGA for me up top, and then I'm looking at value with Russ and probably Miles McBride. We just need that news. I think, like I said, Drew is fine there, but not somebody that I ever feel super comfortable with. Over at shooting guard, Devin Booker is the top projecting option. I said I like him just fine, but a road date with Miami is not super fun or ideal, so I don't think I'm really going to get there. Jaylen Brown is a good value. He seems to crush nightly now, so 8.4K for him. At home against Grizzlies. Memphis is not a good matchup at all, but that's still a discount. I'm not making him a priority, but at 8.4K, that's a little bit too cheap. I do not mind him if you land on him. Kyrie Irving, I'm not really into it, but the matchup and projection are solid. The price isn't egregious. If you don't want to pay for Luka, 8.5K, that's a fairly easy way to get to the Mavs offense in this spot. Kyrie hasn't exactly been killing it, which is not that surprising because when Luka's there, Luka soaks up all the usage. He's only had 20 and 39 fantasy points in his last 2 games, but he did exhibit his ceiling 3 games ago with 61 fantasy points. I just think he usually needs Luka to be out for me to be super interested in him, and I don't think I'm going to get there. I mentioned Jordan Poole and Jamal Murray. If Jamal's in, that's fine. Jordan Poole, if you're going to load up on Nuggets like I probably am, I think that's okay too. Derek White, 6.9 feels a little bit cheap. I think if I'm going to play Boston guys, it's probably going to be Drew or Derek White. But I don't really want to do it, but if I'm going to, that's probably where I'm going. CJ McCollum at 7.1 is okay, but I don't like the matchup with the Thunder that much. I'll be looking at Knicks guys like Mikal Bridges at 5.8K. We know all these Knicks guys get monster minutes. He's projected for 38 minutes, which is insane to be projected for that many minutes. The matchup with the Pistons is really good. He doesn't project well from a fantasy points perspective because he kind of does nothing but score. And he's not the greatest per minute guy, But if no Brunson and or Cat are in this game, Mikal Bridges looks amazing at 5.8K, and I would absolutely love him. Jaden Ivey remains crazy expensive for the role with Cade there. If Cade Cunningham's out, you can entertain that at 7.6. But I don't really like him that much, even if that happens. And if Cade is in, there's no way I'm touching him at 7.6. Christian Brown at 5.4 is a pretty good value if Jamal Murray is out. And Aaron Gordon, like I said, is also questionable, so that just would guarantee more minutes. His minutes are honestly pretty solidified, so I'm not that concerned about it. I think he's just a rock solid play if he's in. He actually popped up in the injury report. He is probable, but he has a quad issue. He hasn't really been hitting. He has not topped 24 fantasy points in any of his last 4 games, but he's playing monster minutes. So in a smash spot against the Wizards, I do like him quite a bit, especially if those guys end up missing. Let's see what else is here. Marcus Smart against his old team at 4.4K is an all right value. I don't have a problem with it, just not a priority. Duncan Robinson is kind of popping in the system here, projected for 24 minutes against the Suns. I'm not super into it. I'd rather some of this other value I'm touching on opens up and we get there instead. I will note Kason Wallace at 4.1K, Isaiah Joe at 3.8K, cheap guys for the Thunder. They are okay. The problem is Alex Caruso is back. So they're kind of cutting into each other. I mean, Alex Caruso at 3.7 is even in play. I just think those guys are flirting with disaster a little bit. And like I said, I'd rather go with the value that I already touched on. I think if you're going to go in that range, just go up to Lou Dort at 4.6. He feels a little bit more stable, which feels weird to say, but it might be the case. All right, over at small forward, Jason Tatum continues to crush. Actually, I don't know. Did he crush his last game? I know Taylor was on him. And yeah, 57 fantasy points. So that was a good call by Taylor. 2 games ago, 39 fantasy points. When they're at full strength, nobody on Boston really pops for me. But Tatum always has that 50 to 60 point, fantasy window. So coming in with a 51 point fantasy projection against the Grizzlies, not the best matchup. Not the most amazing projection for a guy we're paying about 10K for. So just not the guy I really want to pay for. If I'm going to pay up all the way up, I'm going to go get SGA, Luka, or Jokic on this slate, most likely. Like I said, Scotty Barnes, Jaylen Brown, nothing wrong with them. They're okay plays. I just don't love the price on Scotty, and I don't love the matchup that much. If I'm going to go pay for a Raptor and go get that usage, I think RJ Barrett at 8.4K is the better play. Brandon Ingram has a big role, but the matchup with OKC isn't great, especially with DeJounte and CJ back. I just don't see why we have to force that. I do like the price on Jimmy Butler. The projection doesn't blow me away, but 7.6K for Jimmy Butler feels pretty good. Let's see. He is probable with a knee issue, so he should play. He had 41 fantasy points in his last game. He was cruising against the Lakers. He's going to have a massive game. He had 20 fantasy points after the first quarter. So if that game could have just stayed close, he would have smashed. Taylor and I were on him too. Unfortunately, it didn't really work out as well as it could have. But yeah, 7.6K, just a little bit too cheap for him. So I do not mind getting to him at all. $600 less, you can go to get Josh Hart. Next, he just plays monster minutes. He's a really good bet to get 35 or 40 fantasy points. The price is coming up a little bit, but it's a good matchup with the Pistons, and he's going to play a ton. If you want to save money there, I already mentioned Mikal Bridges. He looks good. And OG Anunoby at 6K flat. He also looks good. These guys all look way better if Cat and or Brunson end up missing, but they're all in play regardless just because they play a ton of minutes. Mentioned Bradley Beal. The projection is not great, but he's only 7.9K, and it's basically him and Devin offensively for Phoenix. So if Devin's like 9.5K, I just would rather, if I'm going to target one of them, it's going to be Beal. I just get a big savings, and we still get a good piece of the pie. And he does have a ceiling, so I don't love the matchup or the fact that it's on the road. So I'm not really getting out of my way or going out of my way to use either of those guys, but if I did, it's going to be Beal. Desmond Bane at 6.6 is really interesting. I think that's just a really nice discount. On the road against the Celtics is one of the worst spots. So I'm not going to go pay for Ja Morant or anything on this slate, but I think Desmond Bane at 6.6 is one that does call to me. So if I land on him, I do not have a problem with that. It's just going to be interesting to see if that value opens up with those Knicks guys possibly being out. I just think Desmond Bane's going to go overlooked if OG and Mikal Bridges end up getting, if they end up drawing a lot of ownership. So that could be an interesting tournament play. Right now, though, he is taking out some ownership. So it looks like the field will be right where I'm at as far as what I think about him. Bilal Coulibaly for Wizards at 5.2K. He looks really good. If the game stays close, obviously there is blowout risk for any of the Wizards guys that I mentioned. But if you're going to play Russell Westbrook or whoever else, and Jokic, of course, then it does make sense to run back some Wizards guys, because if Jokic is going to get there, if he's going to play all 4 quarters, then maybe the game stays close and Washington does too. The game does have a 13-point spread, but it also has a 233.5 total. So I will just kind of be hoping that either the young guys that I use will kind of be blowout proof, or the game stays a little bit closer than expected. Royce O'Neal at 5.4 is an okay value with KD still out. Not much of a ceiling there, but pretty safe value play. Don't have a problem with him at all. I kind of already talked about Lu Dort. I don't really want to play Lu Dort. I just think he's the best option for the cheap Thunder guys. Champagny for the Wizards, another really good punt there, coming in with a projection of 24 minutes and 3.5K price tag. It's really about the price. I think he's just a really cheap punt. And with all those guys out for Washington, I think he's viable. Certainly not a safe play. He's not as safe as the other Champagny for San Antonio, but I think he is in play for this slate. Nobody else really popping out. Tim Hardaway Jr. project for 26 minutes, but he sure does a whole lot of nothing sometimes when he's out there. Azura Thompson might be back. Let me actually check the status of him, because that isn't nothing. In case you do end up want to play Pistons guys, he's questionable with the groin issue. He's not played since we did play in December 3rd. But then he has not played since then, and he had been missing time before that. So I don't know. You can keep an eye on him. I think really if he was in, it'd be more like I would have no interest in some of the cheaper Pistons guys then. But even so, I don't know if I really want to stomach THJ just because of how volatile he can be. All right, that kind of does it for small forward. Over at power forward, again, we have Tatum, we have RJ Barrett, who I like. I think if I'm going to pay up at small forward, power forward, RJ Barrett's probably the guy for me. If you want to go down a little bit more, Jimmy Butler is eligible there as well, and he looks really good to me too. Jalen Williams would be the big guy for power forward specifically. He's 8.9K, a little bit more expensive than RJ Barrett, but he does project better, and he's in a smash spot against the Pelicans. If I'm paying all the way up, I certainly prefer him over Jason Tatum, $1,000 in savings. Not really that owned, and also a decent leverage play on SGA if he ends up being remotely chalky. I think you can pair them together too. I'd probably only play one of them personally so I can maximize my ceiling. But he looks good. The price it keeps staying right around 8.7, 8.9K, and that makes sense for the role and upside that he possesses. Jaren Jackson Jr. at 7.2K. The price is really nice, but the matchup with Boston isn't great. I don't think I'd really go on my way to target him, but he does have a ceiling and he is at a discount, so I'll just mention him. Let's see who else. Power forward's pretty gross. Haywood Highsmith at 3.7K. He gets minutes. That's about all I can say there. I mean, it is what it is. Jovic is still out. Kevin Love, I think, is questionable. Let me actually check the status on Love, because that's not nothing. If he is out again, then okay, so he's back. Okay, so if Love is back, I don't really think Haywood Highsmith as he's not as appealing as he would be, but he is cheap and he does play a considerable amount of minutes. So I think you could do a little bit worse as things stand. Hopefully better value opens up though. Brandon Clark's getting minutes at 4.1K. He does a lot when he's out there, so I don't hate that. I'd also keep an eye on who starts for Phoenix, because I believe Nurkic is still out. Nurkic, and obviously KD is out. So also Iguodala is probably a good bet to get 20 to 25 minutes. I would prefer he starts to use him. And then obviously Mason Plumlee, who we'll talk about at center, is there too at the same price. So both those guys are in play. I think I just prefer Mason Plumlee. And the other big one that is not adjusted yet because we don't have that news is going to be Peyton Watson at 4.4K. Love him if Aaron Gordon ends up missing. Obviously, Jamal Murray being out too would just help solidify his minutes. But, I mean, they don't play the same position, so it's not directly correlated. But I do think Peyton Watson could end up being a really good value at 4.4K. All right, over to center we go. Nikola Jokic has the best projection for the entire slate, certainly best projection at center. He has a smash play against the Wizards. The only concerns would be he's 12.1K, and this game does have massive blowout risk. I think I'm just going to play him because he looks awesome. Cat is $3,000 cheaper. He does have a really good projection of 50 going up against the Pistons, which is a good matchup. So I do like Towns a lot, no matter what. If you're not playing Jokic, he's probably the best center play. And if Brunson ends up missing this game, Cat would have massive usage. The only problem is, we don't know for sure if Brunson's going to be out, and Cat himself has a questionable tag. So keep an eye on that. If Brunson's out, Cat looks like a smash. If Cat's out, it's irrelevant. And it's just, I think you have to decide, are you going to play Cat or Jokic probably on this slate? Bam at 8.2K looks pretty good. I don't have a problem with Bam, just not a priority. I think if I'm going to pay for a Heat player, it's just going to be Jimmy. The matchup with Mason Plumlee is just neutral. Plumlee's not a bad defender, but I don't think that would deter me from playing Bam. The 8.2 price tag is just good. It's just a solid price tag. It's a discount on a rock solid player. Porzingis should be active. Let me just double check here. Porzingis, I think he missed the last game. He still seems kind of limited. He only played 29 minutes the last game. His cap so far has been 32, probably about what we can expect. I think that's fine. He can get there. His price has come up from 7 to 7.5, so I still think he's a good play. It's not like a smash play like he was the other day when he was only 7K. But if you want to play him, I don't have a problem with that. Jakob Poeltl is a pretty good price still at 7.3. He is questionable with an illness. He has been crushing 40-plus fantasy points in each of his last 3 games. Dallas has been a fine matchup down low, so I do like him a decent amount. I think he's a solid pivot away from Porzingis. They both are carrying a little bit of ownership, but I think if I had to choose between the two, I'm going to go with him. I just think he's going to provide a little bit more of a ceiling because if he's okay to go, he should play more minutes. Isaiah Hartenstein is right there in that same price range. He also looks good, and he's coming in at half the ownership of them, so I think he's an interesting tournament play and a little bit of a leverage on Jalen Williams. Joe Valanciunas at 5.3K looks really, really good if he ends up starting to take on Jokic. Obviously, there's foul trouble risk. There's getting his minutes yanked around risk, and there's blowout risk. So big time risky play, but he is a very good points per minute guy. If he gets to start at 5.3K, it's going to be very hard to get away from him. And again, the Wizards are shorthanded, and they might even not have Alexander Sarr there. So keep an eye on that. Marvin Bagley drew the start last time and was 3K flat. So he looked good then. I don't think I'd be super interested in him at 4.3K, but like I said, Wizards are down a lot of bodies. So if he starts, and maybe even if he doesn't, I think he's still in play at 4.3. And like I said, Plumlee at 4.2, he also looks like a solid value. They would need his size against Bam Bam, so I think he would start and probably play about 25 to 30 minutes. So I certainly do not have a problem with him. Not seeing any direct punts that really stand out. Also, Iguodala, like I said, I think he's an okay pivot away from Plumlee, and he's also power forward eligible, which is kind of nice. But yeah, nobody else really stands out. So overall on this slate, I think as it stands, I like Jokic no matter what happens with Jamal Murray, but if Jamal is out, that's just more and more usage going to Jokic. So Jokic feels like a smash play. I think I'm going to build around him for sure. If Murray's out, Westbrook feels like a lock. And if Aaron Gordon's out, we can start looking at Peyton Watson and Christian Brown and really just firing up a ton of nuggets here and just hope the game stays close. And you can run it back with a couple of Wizards plays, a lot of good Wizards value to look at. It doesn't feel super comfortable, but it does make sense if you are going to load up on Denver players to just hope that game stays close. And if the funds are there to do it, I really don't have a problem with going and getting a second stud. It does feel like a stars and scrubs slate. We're looking at Miles McBride for the Knicks. If Brunson is out, if Cat is out, we can even look at a Knicks punt for one of their bigs. I don't really feel that good about that strategy, but that is in play. There's even Mason Plumlee. So lots and lots of value. So I think going with Jokic and SGA or Luka, once again, is probably the best way to go here. So that does it for me for this breakdown. Hopefully that helps point out some good values, some good top-end plays for the slate, and just helps your process overall. If it did, please smash that like button and also subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and good luck.